She mocked me in front of the entire class. She acted very unprofessionally. She was a bitch. And I remember almost crying, like she shamed me in front of the entire class and everyone laughed at me. Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Lini Chef, and in today's video I will be talking about Russian school system, a brief history of Russian school system. I'm talking secondary school, the differences between Western school system, to be exact, American and Russian, my own personal rather traumatizing experience, a little bit about bullying, and let's go. Short history of a Russian secondary education system. Russian secondary education evolved from the 18th century noble-focused gymnasiums into a centralized, free and compulsory Soviet system, 10-year in the Soviet Union and now 11-year in modern Russia. For instance, my parents, they graduated from 10-year school system in the USSR. They are the 1960s generation. So respectively, they graduated from school around 1980, so before the Soviet Union collapsed. The school system is characterized by rigorous science and math education, which has continued into the modern Russian Federation from grades 5 to 11 through Unified State Standards and the Unified State Exam, aka ЕГЭ, Единый государственный экзамен. The personal nightmare, but we'll get to it later. Key historical periods. During imperial period, from the 18th century to the early 20th century, the origins. The first academic gymnasium was founded in 1725 in St. Petersburg during the Peter the Great reign. Structure. 18th century development saw the 1786 statute establish main public schools in provincial cities. 19th century reform. The 1864 charter established classical gymnasiums, classics and languages, and real gymnasiums, science, modern languages. These were geared towards nobility and intelligentsia, with separate specialized military schools and academies. Soviet era, from 1917 to 1991. Restructuring. Post-1917, aka post-imperial Russia, education was declared free, secular, and compulsory, aiming to eliminate illiteracy, because right after Russian Empire collapsed, the illiteracy among many Russians was huge, because the vast majority of Russia was agrarian culture and there were a lot of illiterate, uneducated peasants, former slaves. Unification. By the 1930s, the system was unified into primary, which is 1st to the 4th grade, incomplete secondary, 5th to the 7th grade, and secondary, 8th to the 10th grade schools. 10-year system. For most of this period, school training lasted for 10 years. Modern era. From 1991 to the present time, transition happened. At the end of 1990, the system shifted to an 11-year program, the victim, which was fully implemented with compulsory education for ages 7 to 15. Structure. Modern schooling includes low secondary grades from 5 to 9 and upper secondary grades 10 to 11, aka high school. Assessment. The Unified State Exam, aka the nightmare of every single high schooler, ЕГЭ, was introduced as the final standardized exam for graduating 11th grade and for university admission. Speaking of ЕГЭ, this torturous exam was introduced exactly when I was graduating from high school, which happened in 2008. World market crisis, you know. Amazing. Diversification. The system now includes general schools alongside specialized gymnasiums and lyceums. Private education. Since 1996 law, private schools exist, which are often fee-based, although public education remains free. Core features of Russian secondary education. Literacy. Russia achieved a remarkably high literacy rate, estimated at 19.7% in 2015. Uniformity. Education operates under strict state standards. Curriculum. Strong emphasis is placed on mathematics, physics, chemistry, and literature. I hate mathematics. I remember we had so many hours and periods of mathematics, I was going to die. Like, I hate maths because I'm a creative person. We call it гуманитарий, aka I am better at languages, I'm better at arts, literature. I hated maths, but that was compulsory and it was unavoidable and inevitable. So, as we already know, and I just mentioned above, modern Russian school system consists of 11 years, and from grade 1 to grade 9 is the compulsory secondary education, where you can get your diploma about completing the compulsory secondary education and enter the college to receive an associate degree. Let's say you can go to pedagogical college, and by the way, college in Russia is considered associates, not a higher education, a bachelor's degree. That's also the difference between United States, or like the Western education system, and Russian education system. Or you can finish all the 11 years, which is my case, and receive a full secondary education. By the way, this is how the diploma or аттестат о среднем полном общем образовании looks like. Mine is blue because a girl was not a straight A student. And by the way, here's a catch. If you graduate from school with all straight A grades, your diploma will be red. The cover will be red. This is blue because I had one too many B's, but you know.
Puberty hit me hard in the head in the 9th grade.
The teachers, especially because a lot of our teachers were post-Soviet Union and Soviet Union generation, they were extremely strict. You're not allowed to have your opinion whatsoever, and all the subjects were a must to study. You could not skip it, and let's say learning English was not an option, it was a must. And I started learning English, my generation, and like specifically my school, at the 5th grade. I remember being very nervous because it's a new subject, but I nailed it. And also world history, like the ancient history, started at the 5th grade, and eventually it will shift to the modern Russian history by the 10th, 11th grade. Also, when I was growing up and I started in school, the uniforms, especially in primary school, were a must. And depending on a school, every single school kid was supposed to have and wear white top, formal top, and black formal bottom. Remember when I was growing up, you know, the velvet black pants for girls were the trend. They were very acceptable, and I remember they were very expensive. And my parents, they couldn't afford it, so they bought me a pair of jeans. And guess what? Speaking of bullying briefly right now, the teacher, and I proudly wore the jeans and a blouse, and at that time it was unacceptable, especially in school, wearing jeans as a school kid. She mocked me in front of the entire class. She acted very unprofessionally. She was a bitch. And I remember almost crying, like she shamed me in front of the entire class and everyone laughed at me. And I just, you know, I'm coming from a poor family. The 90s generation, the vast majority of us have been traumatized by the post-USSR aftermath, aka completely collapsed, screwed up economy. And of course, buying a pair of jeans was a huge deal. Like any new clothing item was a huge deal if you could actually get it, because usually it would end up happening, especially at the time for the vast majority of people, we would actually end up wearing some old stuff, donated stuff from our, I don't know, cousins, older aunts or uncles, older sisters or brothers. I was the oldest one, but you get the point. And the behavior of the teacher, which I analyzed later on, was extremely unprofessional. And I think if I was a principal at the school with my modern brain, I would have fired her, because this is absolutely atrocious. And teachers, unfortunately, bully kids at school like that. Welcome to Russia. Now, since I used to live in the US, I'm going to compare Russian and USA school systems, and let's get down to the differences. Russian and US schools differ significantly in curriculum structure, with Russian schools emphasizing a uniform, comprehensive, and theoretical approach, while US schools focus on flexibility, student choice, and practical applications. Russian education is often deemed to provide a more complete, academically rigorous understanding of subjects, whereas the US system emphasizes individualized learning, extracurricular activities, and technology. One of the main big differences that you will see in the US movies, Hollywood movies, that you guys have a huge team of cheerleaders. Sports are a huge thing, especially in high school, and if you are like the main cheerleader girl in high school, you are the it girl. We don't have this in Russia. Yes, Russia also emphasizes on sport activities, but It's not as highly advertised. We don't really have cheerleader teams, these cool girls, cool boy aesthetics and things compared to the US, because US definitely does empathize on like sport and games and stuff and cheerleading activities in high school. Whereas in Russia, it's mostly a rigorous preparation for Unified State Exam, aka ЕГЭ. That's one of the biggest differences. Also, Russia follows a really strict standardized curriculum where all students take the same subjects through the grade 11, the last grade, and specialization in science or humanities often begins in high school. And USA offers personalized schedules where students choose classes based on ability and interest with minimal mandatory subjects in high school. And by the way, I remember reading a very old article in the newspaper when there were like two students from United States. They were exchange school students, and guess what? Russian students, when it came to subjects like math and everything, we were 2 years ahead of US school students, because I think it was like the 7th grade those like students were put into Russia, and guess what? Their knowledge of math and everything was 2 years behind, and their temporary Russian peers were helping them to handle the mathematics and other subjects. They were like really 2 years behind. And this is what I also heard from those Russian kids who moved to the US with their parents, or Canada, that let's say whatever we studied like in high school, let's say at the grade 9, they only study at the grade 11. So studying in American school for Russian kids is a lot easier compared to, American kids to study in the Russian school. That honestly says a lot, especially because American kids don't really know geography that well. Sorry. Structure and schedule. So as I mentioned before, Russian full secondary school spans for 11 years. Unlike in the US, it can span up to 12, 13 years, which would have been torture for me, but whatever. And in the US, you know that the school structure is divided into elementary, junior high or middle school, and high school, and it spans for 12, 13 years, like I mentioned before. And in Russia, it is elementary or primary, secondary, compulsory, and, high school. School environment and costs. In Russia, usually public schools are free. However, you end up spending money on stationery, or, of course, your parents. Also, the little things, there were certain extra fees that teachers would charge from parents, but honestly, that was kind of illegal, charging for security or, cleaning services. That was the shady stuff that happened when I was studying in Russian school. Also, like I mentioned above, like in Russian school, there is less emphasis on sports. And by the way, in my personal example, I studied in medically inclined school. I hated medics, and in 10th, 11th grade, if you want to go for free, you go to medical practice, like learn some very basics of medicine and stuff. I decided to choose landscape design. I even have this a little diploma. My parents had to pay roughly, with these currency exchange, like 1,450 rubles, which was a big deal back then, which is roughly 15 bucks, I guess, right now. But considering the inflation, I guess it would have been $150 with the modern currency exchange, because that was years ago, almost 20 years ago.
Bro, I'm a dinosaur. I am a dinosaur.
In the US, as you know, public schools are free, but private schools are common, and significant investment is often made in extracurricular activities and sports. And private schools in the US, as you know, they can be very costly. And usually private schools are for those who can afford it, aka wealthier families. When it comes to the graduation age, typically Russian kids would graduate at the age of 17, 18, which was also my case. And in the US, graduation age is usually 17, 18, but with significant emphasis on standardized testing for college entry, such as the SAT or ACT. You know the drill. Like I mentioned before, bullying is a significant and widespread issue in Russian schools, with victimization rates often reported to be higher than average for OECD countries. Research indicates that approximately 1 in 4 to 1 in 6 students, roughly 16 to 27%, experience bullying on a regular basis. I also fell victim. My bullying experience wasn't that terrible, but anyways. Well, key statistics and trends: the prevalence, verbal and social or relational bullying, example, name calling, spreading rumors, social exclusion are the most frequent forms, while physical bullying is less common but still present. Sometimes it can actually be violent. I remember there were news about kids killing another school kid. It's terrible. Gender differences. Boys are generally more likely to be involved in frequent bullying, both as perpetrators and victims, whereas occasional bullying is more typical among girls. Age and grade. The risk of bullying peaks in middle school, grades 7 to 8, ages 13, 14, aka the early teenage years, and typically decreases as students get older, but also depends. And risk factors. Students from low socioeconomic backgrounds and those with lower academic performance in core subjects are at a higher risk of becoming victims. I faced it myself a little bit, but also I know the girl that used to study with us at the 4th grade, she also fell victim for bullying from teachers, even from the same bitchy teacher, because her family was really poor. They would be selling vegetables in a stall, and she would live in like those ghettos, like those, we call them baraki. Unfortunately, I lived there too because my parents couldn't afford a normal housing. We are coming from the village. And in those low-income houses, there was no showers or bathrooms. Everything was outside. So obviously they couldn't have the luxury to even shower every day and wash clothes on a daily basis. So her family couldn't really afford much. And I remember this teacher bullying her for, oh my God, like your hair is unwashed, blah, 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 in front of the entire class. I was fascinated by that teacher because that teacher was extremely artistic and she was honestly a fucking clown, to be honest with you. And you know, as I grew up and grew older and I analyzed the behavior of this teacher, teachers, like I said before, can be really terrible at bullying kids as well. And this is so sad, especially when it comes to primary school kids, like elementary school kids. They're very susceptible to it and they can't really fight back. And parents wouldn't really tell anything. Welcome to Russian schools, guys. Also, factors contributing to bullying: a school climate. Competitive environments and a negative school psychological climate are strongly linked to high rates of bullying. And also teacher and parent roles. A major problem identified by researchers and students is the lack of intervention by authority figures, like I mentioned. Teachers may sometimes lack the tools or motivation to address the issue, and in some cases, humiliation by teachers is noted as having a more severe impact on students than peer bullying. I shared the story, there you go. Culture and societal context. Some analysis suggests that general atmosphere of violence or the propaganda of war can permeate schools, leading to increased aggression among pupils. Ethnic and class tensions. Bullying based on ethnic minority status or perceived class differences, example, rich kids, poor kids, is also reported as a notable factor. This is also unfortunate, but, well, the upside of this, at least we don't have shootings in school like you guys have it in the United States, which is really sad. Consequences and support. Impact on victims. Victimized students frequently report feelings of misery, sadness, and life dissatisfaction, which significantly affects their mental well-being and academic resilience. Support system. While most schools now have school psychologists, their effectiveness is often criticized by students as notoriously useless. Victims often rely on family support or finding small circles of friends outside the mainstream school hierarchy to cope. Now, moving on to more of a full personal experience. Like I mentioned before, it was a bit traumatizing. I'm really happy it's over, and I graduated back in 2008. I did receive bullying from my peers, first off because at some point, teachers loved me because I was a straight A student. I was very bright and popular and a bit outstanding and standoffish, and my peers didn't like me because it's a herd of dumbass fucking sheep. And I feel like people like me who are slightly neurodivergent and creative, we should study in separate schools, for fuck's sake. Like, seriously. Maybe I am wrong, maybe I am too full of myself, but yes, I became really arrogant and started acting a bit bitchy. Yes, I admit that mistake, but at the same time, people and peers would expect that a straight A student should help them with homework, aka do their homework for them. No, I shouldn't. And I stand my ground and I don't like it. Do I miss the school years? No. Especially because there were years when my father was an alcoholic and I come from a toxic family, very unfortunate one. And as I was also bullied for, my clothes because I couldn't afford anything. Like my family was broke and we come from the village, from the countryside, and I had to change 3 schools. And the third one is the one that I graduated from. So my first school, I studied there for almost 3 years, 2 years and like 3 months. Yeah, that was my elementary school, like the settlement that we used to live in then. My parents moved to Ufa to pursue better life, because there's not much to do in the countryside. So I was temporarily graduating from my 3rd grade in my grandmother's village. There used to be the school there. They closed it down years later, and I graduated from the 3rd grade there. And also there was a significant difference in mathematics program compared to the city school. So when we moved to the city, my parents finally bought this very shitty apartment that we grew up in with an outhouse, with a bathhouse, because we still don't have a shower there, and I don't know how my brother lives there. I was put back into the 3rd grade because the school that I graduated from, they did not have a 4th grade, and I thought of going to the 5th grade, but because mathematics that they were doing, the numbers they were using to perform the tests and stuff, they were using millions as example, and my 9-year-old, 10-year-old brain was not comprehending what was happening. So I had to study in the 3rd grade twice. To me, it was a 4th grade. So basically my peers that graduated with me, they skipped the 4th grade. I don't know why they did that back then. And they studied for 10 years. And I studied for full 11 years with them and graduated with them. Yeah, and also there is such thing in Russian schools. I don't know if it exists still, but if you are a straight A student, you also receive a golden medal as an achievement. And by the way, if you enter certain state universities, which are also subsidized by the government, if you're a straight A student and you successfully passed all of your YGE exams and stuff, and you have a gold medal, you can actually enter certain universities for free, no entry exams. That's a cool stuff. And you can also be eligible for a silver medal if you only have 1 B grade and the rest is all, straight A grades. Not my case, just this freaking blue color diploma, and I think 7 B grades and 8 A grades, whatever. The uniforms. Like I mentioned before, wearing the formal uniform was a must, especially in the primary, aka elementary school. The white top, the white jumper, or a blouse, formal black pants, no jeans. I was heavily bullied for wearing jeans once, and guess what? I was way ahead of the trend because everyone and their mom are wearing a blouse and a jeans, a blouse and a jeans, silk blouse and jeans, and no one is complaining, and they can wear ripped jeans, whatever. But in high school, things shifted, and, well, you can't really fight an angry teenager, so we were allowed to wear jeans, and I remember it was a traumatizing experience of the low-rise jeans. I didn't really have them, but one of my ex-schoolmates, the rich kid, that rich bitch who was using an excessive amount of makeup, she was wearing the skinny jeans, such low rise, like whenever she would sit, you would see the thong. And oh my God, teachers would make fun of it. A lot of other school kids would make fun of it, calling it the vending machine. Like, you have to put the coin in it, you can put the coin in it, whatever. Yeah, what a glorious time. In general, yes, up until the 8th grade, I really liked studying in school, especially because I was in love with the most popular boy in school. But once I hit puberty, 9th, 10th, and especially 11th grade were pretty gruesome, and I fell into this teenage depression, and it was really hard on me. And thank God I graduated. That was the experience. If I remember anything, I may add it later on. Let me know what country you are watching this from, what is your school system is like. This was my experience and a little brief video about Russian schools. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!